Good evening, everybody. Bonsoir tout le monde. Welcome. Bienvenue. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, of course, to our special guest, Madame Dominique Anglade, and to our moderator, Royal Orr. On October 3rd, Quebecers are going to the polls. It is a pivotal election, and the Quebec Community Groups Network is determined to ensure that the concerns of the English-speaking community are voiced and addressed. I encourage all of you to go to our website and read our platform, which was developed in collaboration with organizations representing the English-speaking community and English-speaking Quebecers across various regions and sectors. We are also asking the party leaders to respond to questions of concern to our community. We have now released our first two blocks of questions. The first was on rights, and this week it's on education. But nothing beats hearing from the party leaders and having a conversation with them. And this will be a conversation. We are delighted that Dominique Anglade, the leader of the Liberal Party of Quebec, is with us tonight. Colin Standish of the Canadian Party of Quebec will be with us next week on Wednesday. We will be scheduling other sessions in the coming weeks. Before turning the evening over to our moderator, Royal Orr, I would like to begin by acknowledging that the Quebec Community Groups Network, its member organizations, carry out their activities on partially unceded lands and territories, which were the traditional homes and gathering places for many Indigenous nations whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. The QCGN acknowledges our First Nations have a long and rich history of occupation and stewardship of these lands that long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. The QCGN's recognition and respect for the history of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people is an important step towards building trust and creating and renewing relationships and contemporary Indigenous people and communities. Now I'm going to turn it over to Royal, who's going to lead us through the evening.
Thanks very much, Ava, and thanks to everyone who's joining us this evening. Our guest tonight, obviously, Dominique Anglade. She's served as a member of the National Assembly since 2015, representing Saint-Henri-Sainte-Anne. She is the first woman to lead the Quebec Liberal Party, the first Black woman to lead a provincial party in Quebec, and the first person of Haitian descent to be a cabinet minister in Canada. Ms. Anglade was Minister of Economic Development, Innovation and Export Trade, as well as Deputy Premier of Quebec in the Couillard government. She was chosen as leader of the Liberal Party in May 2020. So before asking Ms. Anglade to speak a little bit to start us off, let me briefly outline the plan for the evening. Ms. Anglade will have up to 10 minutes for her opening remarks. We'll then engage in a conversation with her for about 40 minutes. The discussion will be divided into 4 topics. First of all, rights and access to justice. Second, education. Third, health and social services. And then finally, the vitality of Quebec's English-speaking community. Those of you listening in are encouraged to suggest questions for Ms. Anglade, and we'll be using those questions throughout this hour together. You can do that using the Q&A function, which is down there at the bottom of your screen. We ask you to please keep your questions short and relevant to today's topics. Meanwhile, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, like I did there for a moment, you can please send an email to events@qcgn.ca. And now, let me call on Dominique Anglade for her opening remarks. Ms. Anglade.
Thank you so much, Royal and Eva, for welcoming me tonight with you. It's a great pleasure for me to have this opportunity to have an open conversation and dialogue. Je dirais que la question anglophone touche aussi les francophones. On est tous impliqués là-dedans. Et donc, s'il y a des personnes qui souhaitent poser des questions tout à l'heure en français, ben, faites-le parce que ça va être aussi l'opportunité. Quand on parle de la communauté anglophone, ce n'est pas juste la communauté anglophone, c'est l'ensemble des Québécois qui sont touchés par ça. You said you shared, Royal, my background in terms of politics, but on October 3rd, people will have to make a choice, and the choice is not only the party, the values, but also the leader. And I would like to share a little bit of my background so people understand where I come from in terms of values. I was born and raised in Montreal. I'm an NDG girl. I grew up in NDG, and both my parents came originally from Haiti, and they fled the dictatorship. My father was in exile, was a political prisoner in Haiti, and they both moved to Quebec before my sister and I were born. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because both my parents were really engaged in Quebec. There were at home, a lot of conversations around politics, about rights of people, fighting for democracy, fighting for women, as my mother was very involved with vulnerable women as well. All this to say that when we talk about minority rights, when we talk about values, when we talk about what we need to stand for, this is something that is not only near and dear to my heart, but really part of the DNA that I was brought up with, and that I conveyed to my own 3 children that are 15, almost 14, and almost 11. They're going to turn all these ages during the electoral campaign. But it is important to me to mention this because at the end of the day, values are really what bind us together. And when we talk about the future of Quebec, when we talk about what we want, we need to talk about values. I'm an engineer by training. I worked, of course, in Quebec, but also I spent a number of years in Ontario and in British Columbia before coming back here to Quebec. Very involved in the community as well, different organizations. I co-founded a foundation to fight poverty, specifically with women. And at the same time, I worked with different organizations in economic development. And before going into politics, I was the CEO of Montreal International. Politics. Let's talk about the last 4 years. The last 4 years, we've seen a government, and specifically a premier, that has consistently trying to divide all of us. If you think of the bills at the beginning of the mandate of the CAQ, Bill 9, some of you will remember, but it's all about immigration, destroying files of people that wanted to come and live here in Quebec and saying, you know, we no longer do this way, we're getting rid of the files. We voted against that bill. There was Bill 40. We think that the English-speaking community has the right to control the education system. We voted against Bill 40. Came Bill 21. 21 that was going, yet again, way too far, and using the non-withstanding clause preemptively. We should never be doing this. I mean, in terms of values that we should be j'essaie de trouver le bon terme, at really raising in terms of values, using a preemptive non-withstanding clause is mind-boggling, because basically you taking the rights from people to say, we want to take this to courts. And that's what they've done with Bill 21. That's what they've done with Bill 96. Bill 96, again, many issues with Bill 96. We voted against Bill 96. And again, when you talk about preemptive non-withstanding clause, it was the case for Bill 96. I think many of you might have questions around those different bills, and I will be able to go back and forth during the question period and answer them with you. But before turning it over to you, I would like to talk about October 3rd and what this election is all about. Again, we have a Premier, François Legault, that has tried to divide us, Francophones versus Anglophones, and immigrants versus non-immigrants, and regions versus cities. In many different ways, he's tried to divide us. And I don't think this is the way we should be going forward. We don't believe with the Liberal Party that this is the way we want to go forward. On October 3rd, let me tell you, the Liberal Party of Quebec is ready to govern for 2 reasons. One, we have a team that is composed of people from all the different regions, but also from the English-speaking community. I don't want to miss anybody, but if I think of Jennifer Macaron and Greg Kelly and Desiree McGraw and people that are really sensitive to the question of the English community, if I think of Michelle Setlacque, am I missing? Oh, of course, we have Elizabeth Prass that was nominated yesterday, and many other people in different. Carol Green, I was with Carol Green today in Outaouais, people representing the community, but also people from all over the different regions. And the Liberal Party is stronger because we represent everybody and because we unite everybody. The other element that is really important on October 3rd is having a plan. And we do have a platform that talks about the economy. People have a hard time making ends meet here in Quebec. Inflation has gone through the roof. That's why we want to lower taxes for the middle class, but also make sure that seniors, I was talking to a senior like a few weeks ago, seniors that cannot have a revenue that is increasing. So that's why we want to have a senior allocation of $2,000 for every senior that is not taxable, that would have a positive impact for all our seniors. This is something that is part of the platform. Healthcare. As I talked about Bill 96, one of the issues that we want to make sure that doesn't happen with Bill 96 and we want to fix is the whole question about access to healthcare in the language of your choice. But healthcare in general, we need to have a family doctor for every single Quebecer. It is really important. We have a lot of people that are distressed right now. We have over 1 million people that don't have access to a family doctor. And this is another element that we want to bring forward. And lastly, we need a premier with a vision that combines the economy and the ecology. That's the ECHO project that we have, where we're saying we can create wealth for all Quebecers from all strides by building a real platform in order to fight climate change and generate real impact and wealth for everybody with hydroelectricity, but also with wind, also with solar energy, water, and of course, green hydrogen. This is something that we want to do. I was looking at the Chancellor, German Chancellor coming to Canada and not coming to Quebec, as we think that we should be the one leading the way in terms of this transition and fighting for climate change. All this to say, there are many topics that we could talk about, but I want to talk about issues that are near and dear to your hearts, and that's why I'll turn it over to you, Royal, so we can start this dialogue.
Thanks very much, Ms. Anglade. And I want to encourage you, yes, to send us your questions using the Q&A function here on the platform. Just send them to us, and we will be using those questions throughout this hour. I just want to mention quickly that at the end of our hour together, we'll give Ms. Anglade a couple more minutes just to kind of wrap up at that point, but I think that's a good start for us. If I might start with a question while we wait for some of them to come in from the people listening and watching. You mentioned that eventually you came out in opposition to Bills 21, 40, and 96, but I think it's fair to say that many Quebecers, especially English-speaking Quebecers, felt that you didn't come out quickly enough, clearly enough, or strongly enough, especially with respect to Bill 21 and Bill 96. What would you say to those people?
We voted against those bills. We voted against Bill 21, and right at the beginning, the notwithstanding clause was not aligned with the values that we had, and we said this all along. I think it was we were quite, and remember those bills also were passed in the middle of the pandemic, but voted against Bill 21 and Bill 96. François Legault has pushed this bill, has changed the bill as we were going forward. Every single day in committee, this bill became harder than it was the day before because, and you'll remember that, Dawson project that was supposed to go ahead, that didn't go ahead. You'll remember that in terms of choosing judges, they made it harder than what it was originally in the bill. When it comes to the choice of students to decide which CEGEP they're going to attend, they made it harder on the bill than it was originally. And every day you realize like they were just making it harder and harder. At the end of the day, What matters is that we stand very strong with our values and we voted against Bill 96. There are many things that need to get fixed, and we will fix them as the government of Quebec, repealing all the elements that are totally not acceptable and not aligned with the liberal values that we stand for. So the message that I have is, again, we're the only party that voted against all these bills, the only one.
Okay, I want to mention to people, this segment of our conversation is about rights and access to justice. We'll ask you to keep your questions a little bit focused on that. We're going to get on to education, on to health and social services, onto the vitality of the community a little bit later, but right now it is justice, access to justice. Yes, I'm accepting that you eventually got there in terms of opposing these bills, publicly, and I'm accepting that COVID changed everything. But some critics did say that at least initially you were driven more by politics than by principle in coming up with your positions on Bill 21 and Bill 96. So again, I'm just going to push you a little bit on that, because I think that was the perception, that you were trying to figure out how to square the circle of standing up for human rights but not offending a constituency that you needed to appeal to.
You know, Royal, I'm the daughter of immigrants. I'm the daughter of people that fought for what democracy was supposed to mean. I mean, at the end, what really matters is like the values that are really inside of you and what you defend. And I think the Liberal Party has always been true to itself regarding to values. Hindsight is 20/20. Could we have done more? Could we have said more? Perhaps, but at the end of the day, again, we were as a caucus, we were very aligned on the things that didn't make sense around like the notwithstanding clause. And we said, like, how is this going to apply? Our responsibility was to say, okay, can we just remove that notwithstanding clause, and realizing that nothing was going to move, that in fact, every day was harder than the day before. And thinking the only option is not only like to vote against this, but to really be vocal about this and clearly state what are the issues that are at stake. The problem here is François Legault. The premier that's dividing us is François Legault. And we should never forget that this is the government that we need to change.
So, question from one of our listeners, one of our viewers. Why is the Liberal Party keeping any of the provisions of Bill 96? Repeal the whole thing. Is that a commitment you're prepared to make this evening? If you are elected, will you repeal Bill 96 in its entirety?
There are elements of Bill 96 that we will totally repeal to fix it. There are elements that we want to keep, such as, let me give you a specific example, free French classes to all Quebecers. This is something that we introduced ourselves that we think would be really conducive and to support, and it's something that was also coming from an English-speaking community. The notion that Quebec, as it was voted in Parliament, in Canadian Parliament around the nation, that is included in that. Those elements are the things that we would be that we would still support. The things that don't make sense around 6 months to learn French, around healthcare access, around access to justice, notwithstanding clause, CJEP limits, all these elements, obviously we would remove them.
Okay, another question coming from the people listening. You've run private sector businesses. You have a strong experience as an executive within various private sector entities. So one of the things that people are concerned about, exercised about, is the increased power for the Office de la Langue Française. The ability to go in and basically, it would seem, in ways that are kind of against an awful lot of the principles of law in Quebec and in Canada, seize documentation, seize information, seize data. Is that something you're going to pull away from? Is that something you're going to prevent if you become premier?
Absolutely, without any doubt. And the reason for that is this idea of searching without a warrant is really going against again the Bill of Rights. I mean, that's what it is, and that's why we would totally remove that element. It would repeal that element as well.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks for people for their questions.
And the other thing Royal mentioned is that this is not something that is. Some people might think this is benign or something regarding the businesses, but we hear businesses right now go looking at this and saying this makes no sense. I mean, we have major issues. And this is really impacting our long-term ability to live as a small and medium-sized company, or even for major corporations. So this is really a big problem.
Okay, the question in terms of recruitment, that's something that can affect potential investment in Montreal and in Quebec, obviously. In terms of recruitment, let's touch very quickly on Bill 21. If you get elected, are you going to repeal Bill 21, most specifically those parts of the legislation which, from many people's perspective, discriminate against people on the basis of religion?
Yeah, so the question around Bill 21 is that we would remove the notwithstanding clause and we would not apply this to the education sector. There is no reason why we should apply this to the education sector. You were talking about manpower issues. We should judge people not on what they're wearing, but what they have in their head, really. That's what we should be doing. And that's why we would, again, remove the notwithstanding clause and not apply this to the education sector.
But you would continue to apply it to the public sector, judges, police officers, people in a position of authority?
And for those elements, for all the people in authority, we would like the courts to decide what is the right way to go regarding those roles, and then adjust accordingly.
But isn't that just dodging the issue? Why not come out with a clear position on this? Why wait for the judges to decide?
Because we think that ultimately this bill was going too far regarding the education sector. But again, there was a consensus in Quebec, generally speaking, that people in positions of authority, we've been discussing this since 2007, could be impacted by the bill. We want to make sure that the courts decide the course of action for the future. So again, repealing notwithstanding clause and not applying it right away to the education sector.
You talk about a consensus on its application to people in positions of authority. Do you share in that consensus? Do you agree with that?
You know, we've had conversations on this, dialogues on this since 2007, and again, I think the courts will need to decide on this. So the whole question around what we call laïcité, what does that mean for people in authority? Again, there was the whole report that was presented back then. We want the courts to tell us exactly the course of action, and again, we would react accordingly.
Okay.
And you know, generally speaking, I believe that having the courts telling us, giving us directions as well, is also a good thing in our democracy.
Okay, let's move on to education. And so once again, looking for your questions for Ms. Anglade. So please use that Q&A function to enter your questions about education, the education system, the future of education, governance of education. We'd love to get your questions on that as well. Ms. Anglade, while we wait for some of those questions to come in, Bill 40 and the right of the English-speaking community to manage and control its own schools. What steps will you take to try and ensure not just that Bill 40 doesn't apply to the English-speaking community, but that we don't find ourselves in this situation anytime a nationalist government is elected?
Everything we can do to prevent this, we will. This is a situation where we don't even respect like the whole idea of a constitution. So in our opinion, it's very clear that the English-speaking community has to have the control of how they want to manage the school boards. It's without any ambiguity. So we would not support, obviously we did not support Bill 40, but we would allow this. And now you're asking me, what can we do to prevent another party like the CAQ to do it in the future? Well, to have liberal governments. And then in the future, if there is any way we can prevent this, I would certainly look into this.
Well, one of the ways your immediate predecessor, Mr. Couillard, seemed to try to address this was to engage Quebec more directly in Canadian affairs, in the Canadian Constitution, try to find a way for Quebec to finally join the Canadian Constitution. Would this not be part of your strategy to heighten the importance of the Constitution and to help Quebecers recognize that the Constitution is accepted by Quebec and should be applied in its entirety?
You know, this is something in all the issues that we're facing. I remember Mr. Couillard saying that he even wrote a book regarding this issue. And at the end of the day, there was not much appetite to discuss those issues. And you know what? I really believe that if a government wants to do something in that direction, unfortunately, as we've seen with the CAQ, they can't do it. The response to this is really to make sure that we have a strong party with upholding strong values and communicating this to all Quebecers, so everybody feels concerned about that. One of the issues that we've seen with the number of bills that have been passed with the CAQ is as if, because it's not touching a certain group of people, it's not impacting all Quebecers. It's wrong. It's impacting all Quebecers. And I think we have a role to play in telling the population, in telling everybody, when you touch one person in your society, it's not that one person that you touch, it's every single Quebecer. And this message has to be heard loud and clear.
Okay, here's a question from one of our viewers, one of our listeners. Ms. Anglade, do you support the children of English mother tongue immigrants being able to go to English language schools? In effect, taking the so-called Canada Clause and expanding it internationally. Do you support that?
Do I support what? I'm not sure I understand the question.
So,
children of English-speaking
immigrants. So if somebody moves to Quebec, an immigrant comes to Quebec, and they are mother tongue English, and they've gone and done their schooling in English, would you support that they should have the right to go to English language schools?
So that would go against like the Bill 101, basically,
Yes.
is what you're saying. So we support, at Liberal Party of Quebec, we support Bill 101. We do not support Bill 96, but we do support Bill 101, and we keep it that way.
But doesn't that prevent our community from renewing itself? I mean, what you're basically saying is that only the Francophone community has the right to accept and educate children in its language, and the English-speaking community does not.
We believe that the common language here, and I think a lot of people in the English-speaking community believe that at the end of the day, the common language is French, and we're all in favor of supporting the French language and promoting it. And again, Bill 101 is just saying we should be sending the kids to French school, and the Liberal Party is supportive of that. But at which point do we say this is going too far? That's when you go to Bill 96, and this is when it's going too far, and you try to enforce something. I believe that having kids that are bilingual, that are speaking English, that are speaking French, that can do both is something that is absolutely fantastic. And you know what? I have 3 children myself that are being raised in 3 different languages, and I think this is something that we should promote and value. This is something that Quebec has to offer, and we should all value this. And again, for all Quebecers, we should value that.
Another question from our viewers and listeners. What led the Liberals to suggest that English CEGEP students should take 3 courses in French? Was it just designed to appease the CAQ?
Hindsight is 2020. We believe that there was this that was introduced, but again, realizing that nobody was consulted and it would impact, it could impact the success of children. So let me be clear, because I've always said that the last thing we wanted is to have a negative impact on the success of our students. So when we say that, now we're clear, those courses should be optional. That's what we want to fix with Bill 96. But again, hindsight is 2020, and leadership is about recognizing all the work that wasn't done in the first place in order to really understand the impact of that.
Okay, a couple of quick questions about CEGEPs and English language CEGEPs in particular. Are you looking at having caps on enrollments in English language CEGEPs, and are you prepared to fund them adequately if you're going to remove any caps?
So we don't want to have caps for CEGEPs, and when we talk about funding adequately, the best example of that is the Dawson Project. We were very clear that we would fund the Dawson Project. The CAQ government was in favor. They decided to change their position because of political issues and because of the polls that they had. But we, as a Liberal government, we would do the expansion of Dawson, no question about that. And I think that's the main one, but that's the principle that should be guiding us. At the end of the day, the principle that we should be looking at is what are the needs of the CEGEPs, regardless of the language, and making sure that every student has the same opportunity, the same classroom, the same size of the same environment to study as any student. It doesn't matter which language you speak.
Okay, another question from the people listening, and this just gets to the complexities of some of these issues, including the CEGEP issues. So, there are many Anglophone students who could not even enroll in the English CEGEPs this year, even with high grades. What would the Liberal Party do to ensure that Anglophone students get guaranteed access to English CEGEPs, if that is what they want? Again, you know, English language CEGEPs are popular, right? And this has really resulted in this almost inflation of what's required to get into many of the programs.
One of the principles that is guiding us is making sure that the English-speaking Quebecers can have access to English-speaking CEGEPs. So yes, this is part of the principles that we have in our platform in order to allow that and making sure that everybody, English-speaking Quebecers, can actually have access to CEGEP. You're right in saying that there was an inflation because some of them became a lot more popular, but working with the CEGEPs, we can find the right solutions for that. And that's the principle that will be guiding us.
Okay, but isn't that going to, if you're not going to have caps, and you're going to make sure that English-speaking students have access, then are we not necessarily talking about, you know, growing numbers in English language CEGEPs with all of the criticism that brings and all of the targeting of our CEGEPs that brings? How are you going to try and make sure that, I don't know, you know, Richard Martineau doesn't dine out next year or in 2 years on the fact that English language CEGEP numbers are growing if you are really going to do what you say you're going to do?
Well, I think this is, again, we need to look at this with all the people sitting around the table. One of the issues with the CAQ is the fact that you have a government deciding all kinds of things without even talking to people, without having to sit down, conversations, interviews. François Legault is nowhere to be seen, not answering any question, but making decisions every single day. I think we have to keep in mind that as a principle for leadership, you need to engage people in decisions that impact them. And that's not what this government is doing. I find this mind-boggling that such important decisions are being made on a monthly basis with a CAQ without even consulting with people. That is totally unacceptable. And we will never govern this way. Never, never, never govern this way. So we can make a hypothesis what happens if we make sure that people what this reporter is going to write. What really matters to me is that we get everybody around the table. We sit down and we make the decisions that are right for all Quebecers.
Okay, so your answer is basically we'll sit down and talk. We'll get the right people around the table. We'll find solutions. Do you think that's adequate for the person who's asked this question, who perhaps has somebody in their family who wasn't able to get into the CEGEP program that they wanted as a result of what goes on? What can you point to in your own experience that convinces you that that kind of approach is, you know, is real and isn't just some kind of Pollyanna way to put off a question about a tough issue?
So let me go back to what we said around the person that is talking about her child or his child like going to a CEGEP. Let me be clear on that. This person should be allowed to go to English-speaking CEGEP, and all the steps that need to be taken to make sure that this happens. So it's not talk; it's about making sure that this happens. First of all. Second of all is getting people around the room and having people sit down and talk and dialogue is really critical. I was in business myself. I've managed people. I've managed businesses like. And at the end of the day, bottom line, you need to make sure that everybody is in. Otherwise, you get in a very divisive situation, very divisive society when people don't talk to each other and you encourage extremes everywhere. And this is what we're seeing everywhere in the world right now. This is not the Quebec of the future. Quebec of the future is about valuing everybody, is making sure that we don't divide Quebecers based on the color of their skin or based on the language that they speak, that we represent all Quebecers. And yes, it means sitting down with people and having dialogues. And it's not just talk, talk, talk. It's just doing the right thing to make the right decisions.
Okay, so let's move on now to health and social services. Thank you, Ms. Anglade. So again, use that Q&A function if you have got some questions you'd like to pose to the leader of the Liberal Party of Quebec, Dominic Anglade, about health and social services. Put them into the chat, and we'll be sure to use some of them. Ms. Anglade, before we get into some of the specifics about health and social services in the English-speaking community, could you give us your quick sense of how well Mr. Legault and the CAT government have managed and continue to manage the COVID crisis?
16,000 people died. 16,000. We have it is the case, the most restrictive rules in North America, yet the highest number of people that died in Canada. So in terms of results, it is objectively a disaster in terms of the results in Quebec. That's the situation we're in. So I don't think it was well managed. I don't think it was well prepared. We had a number of waves. First wave is one thing, but there were other waves. And every time we're trying to anticipate, there was no ability to anticipate with the CAT government. So at the end of the day, I think what we have in front of us is a government that is lacking anticipation skills, that doesn't have the vision, that is like really, even when we talk about inflation, just to give you another example, we talk about inflation. François Legault stood in the Salon Bleu and told me, the Liberal Party thinks inflation can go up to 5%. I mean, I don't know what planet they're living on. That's the Premier of Quebec, not being able to anticipate what's going on right now in the world. So again, I don't think it was well managed. There was a lot of communication that was done early in the process, but the result is there. And our seniors have suffered tremendously from this situation everywhere, with real consequences on families, on mental health, and all the things that need to be fixed now.
Okay, a series of quick questions here coming in from people. First question, how is the Liberal Party going to have a family doctor for everyone in Quebec? You're pumping that line pretty hard. How are you going to do it? Nobody so far has been able to fix this problem.
First of all, in 2018, there were 400,000 Quebecers that were on the waiting list to get a family doctor. Today, it's more than 1.1 million Quebecers. In 4 years, 1.1 million Quebecers that don't have access to a family doctor. And what is François Legault telling us? He's saying, okay, the numbers are, I did say that I would commit to this. I don't know how I'm going to realize it, but I'm forgetting about this promise. I'm not going to focus on this at all. So basically, this number could go to 1.1, to 1.2, to 1.5. There's no limit. We know from science that people need to have a family doctor, especially people with chronic disease, people with mental health issues. They need to have somebody that they can really have access to. In order to do this, we need to increase the number of doctors that we have here in Quebec. The government doesn't even recognize that we don't have enough doctors. So that's what we said. We're going to increase the number in terms of training by 1,000 doctors. We want to have 1,000 doctors more in the system. We also want to recognize, spend time recognizing the equivalence of diplomas that are not necessarily from here, and for those doctors to be able to practice here. And it's not only about doctors, it's also about nurses, practitioner nurses. We have about 1,000 of those nurses here in Quebec. We want to increase that number to 3,000. It takes 2 years to train those nurses. We need to have a strong focus on the people that could fulfill those roles. Another element, if I may add one more thing, family doctors right now, they do activities in hospitals that are not related to their clinic. We also need to consider the work in the clinic as something that they could do to replace the activities that they're doing in hospitals, to allow them to take to be responsible for more patients in the medical sector.
Ms. Anglade, doctors are expensive to train, and they're kind of expensive to pay when they're doing their work. Where are you going to find the money for this kind of an initiative? I mean, that's actually a question we have from one of our viewers. I mean, how do you propose to pay for this enhancement and expansion of the healthcare system, including those 1,000 extra doctors?
So a few things. First and foremost, we're going to have a balanced budget, in the sense that when we're going to be presenting the whole platform during the electoral campaign, I guarantee you that numbers are going to match. So it's not something that that we can come up with without any money. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's costing us tremendous amount of money not to have a family doctor per person, a tremendous amount of money. If you look at the emergency rooms, people that are exhausted, people that are waiting 14, 15 hours, parents that have to take time off in order to bring their kids because they don't have access to family doctors, the impact on people in general, it has a tremendous cost that should be taken into account. Lastly, we need to create wealth. We also need to make sure that wealth is being created with the economy of the future. And when I talk about the economy of the future, I talk about the ECHO project. The ECHO project is about ecology and economy, making sure that we have companies that are investing in Quebec, making sure that we fix the question around manpower. François Legault has said for years up to now that manpower shortage was a positive thing. It has a huge negative impact on our economy. And that's why we need to fix also the issue of manpower to increase the number of, to increase the wealth level that we can create. So these elements are part of the platform.
Okay, another quick question here, and this gets into another sector, which I think arguably could be said to be, if not in crisis, close to crisis, and that is long-term care for seniors. What's your party's plan to increase the availability of adequate long-term care facilities for our elders?
Most seniors live at home, and most seniors want to stay at home. The best maison des aînés, like they like to call it with the CAC, is the one where you live right now. Everything is increasing except the revenues for our senior people. So there are two things we want to do. First of all, we want to make sure that every senior can get a senior allocation of $2,000 per year, non-taxable, so this can help them make ends meet, basically, and face the situation for the future and reassure seniors that we will be there to support them in the long run, and they can pay for services and health services as well at home. Then we need to support different organizations, corporations, the cooperative, je sais pas, the cooperative, Royal, if you can help me with my English, like the cooperative, but making sure that we support and we develop them so can they develop services so we can go to senior homes and support them at their place instead of with the CHSLD. Lastly, manpower. Again, we don't have enough people. At the end of the day, there are 220,000 jobs that are not fulfilled today. A lot of them are in the healthcare sector. We need to focus on this. There are two ways of doing this. One is to encourage people that are retired to go back to work, but having an incentive. It's part of our platform, but also the whole question around immigration. Immigration is also another element. We've been saying that we need, the CAC has been saying that they want to lower those numbers. We want to increase them to 70,000 people a year, and then work with every region to define how many people we need region by region.
We've had a couple of questions here about mental health services and the difficulty of accessing it across the population, but in particular for English-speaking Quebecers. What are you going to do to ensure adequate access to health care in English for mental health needs?
So in the platform that we have, a couple of things. There are areas in Quebec where more isolated. I can think of les Îles de la Madeleine and Gaspésia and in Estrie. There are areas that are more isolated that need specific requirements, and they have organizations that need to be better financed in order to support their communities. So we need to focus on those organizations that are providing services and are not being heard by the government at all in terms of resources, additional capacity, and that's where we need to get the focus. Mental health. Mental health is a topic that is, I say near and dear to my heart, but I had a mother that suffered from mental health issues, and I know the impact it has on children, on the husband, on the colleagues. It is not acceptable that in 2022, mental health is still considered something that is different than physical health. So that's why you're going to see that we want to have universal access to psychotherapy for everybody within our system. The people, the structure needs to be better organized, but we need to have that access so people can actually refer to psychologists or psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers in order to support them. So that universal access is really key and again, part of the platform.
Okay, last question here. This is really inside baseball within the English-speaking community, so I'll encourage people to recognize that this is an important issue, and that is access plans. Access plans, we're still waiting for those to be approved so that English-speaking Quebecers have a sense in their regions of what services they should be able to access. What's your commitment? If you're elected, are you going to fast track those access plans and make sure that they are put in place and make sure that we have adequate community input going forward in terms of the application of these access plans?
So my understanding from those access plans is there are regional, like they differ region by region, right, Royal? I'm not mistaken. And one of the cornerstone of our platform is the charter for the regions, because we believe that every region has different specific needs, and that would totally fall under that category in order to accelerate this. So for example, if you would have a community that would say, you know, we have two priorities and one of them would be to accelerate this, we would say, okay, so then for that specific region, let's make sure that we accelerate that. So I would be in total support of that.
Okay, so let's move on to our fourth and last topic. That is the vitality of the English-speaking community. Again, we welcome your questions. Use that Q&A function at the bottom of the platform to send us some of your questions about the vitality of the English-speaking community. Ms. Anglade, the Secretariat for Relations with English-speaking Quebecers, which was a creation of Liberals way back, or not way back, during the Couillard regime, they've done a study and they say, according to their data, that just 3% of the nearly $1.1 billion allocated to the community sector in provincial funding comes to the English-speaking community. That's something like a quarter of what the population should suggest. What are you going to do to make sure that the community sector is funded to a level which is equivalent to what French-speaking Quebecers already enjoy?
So again, this ties back to a question that we had before around community services that people can receive in different regions in English that are not being supported, and that been asking for years, you know, we need more support, we need more resources. They're not getting that level of support. So we would do that. It would be sit down with the communities and making sure that those words and demands are heard. That's why there is a secretary specifically dedicated to that. But it's not only just saying that it's there. You have to actually believe in it. You actually have to act upon it. And the reality is at the CAC, they don't care. I mean, it's not so much a matter of money. It's a matter of willingness. It's a matter of political will to say, this is something that we're going to do because it matters, because it's the right thing to do. And that was the original objective of establishing that organization, reporting directly into the Premier. And there has been no movement, no real action in the last 4 years, because they really don't care. I mean, that at the end of the day, that's the reason why they don't care. We care.
So will you make a commitment tonight, this evening, that you will enhance the money available to the community sector for English-speaking Quebecers?
Yes.
Will you?
Yes, I will make the commitment, and it will be part. But and you know what? You will see it region by region, depending on the.
Right. That's fair enough. Okay, will you make a commitment? And again, we've seen Liberals do this previously, and there's not been any action. But as you know, representation by English-speaking Quebecers in the Quebec Public Service is shockingly low. Will you make a commitment this evening that you will move that up, that you will take steps to ensure that, you know, something even close to fair is reflected in the numbers of English-speaking Quebecers who work for the Quebec government?
So the answer is yes. But let me just add a few words to this. At the end of the day, what you want is to have a good representation of society in general. And the role of the government is to make sure that in public service, that representation of everybody, men, women, English-speaking community, like different background. This should be the principle that is guiding us in the decisions that we make. So that's why, for me, it's a principle-based decision, right?
Okay, but the English-speaking community, I'm just going to stick on this one for a couple more minutes, Ms. Anglade. English-speaking community represents something approaching 14% of the population of Quebec, according to the last statistics. Our representation in the Quebec Public Service is something more like 1%. Is there systemic discrimination within the Quebec Public Service against English-speaking Quebecers?
I think the whole question around systemic racism, discrimination does exist, generally speaking, in Quebec, and I'm the first one to recognize it. And we have to say it out loud, you know. And the way to do this is not to say, because François Legault doesn't want to say that there is systemic racism. He doesn't want to call it out. He doesn't want to say the word because, you know, that it has a number of implications for him. But at the end, it's not about this person is racist or this person is racist. It's about biases in our society that are preventing us from hiring a person, or with the police, people being arrested because of the way they look, all these elements. So again, this is a principle that we should be using, is the fact that we believe that there is systemic racism or systemic discrimination, and that we should all fight against that. Regardless of the groups that we're talking about, we should all fight against that.
Okay, questions again from folks who are listening and viewing. Is the vitality of the English-speaking community a liberal value?
I would say yes. Yes, because it's part of who we are. It's part of our DNA. It's part of Quebec. I mean, when we talk about English speaking and French speaking, it's all intertwined, right? From a historical perspective, we collectively have built cultural organizations together, universities together, hospitals together. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all intertwined, right? That's the way it should be considered. And the value that represents this within the Liberal Party is inclusion. So it's the notion of inclusion, that nobody is rejected, everybody is part of that society. One thing that really, I'd say, like something that hurts me the most is when you hear people saying, you know, I don't feel I belong, I've had it, I want to leave, I don't think I'm being well represented, I feel like people, it's almost I cannot be who I am really, because I don't feel respected. All these elements, like, I never feel, every time I hear this, I never feel good about that, because I believe that everybody should be a contributor and should feel that way within Quebec.
But speaking this way leads to criticism of you and your leadership and of the Liberal Party. Just this morning, speaking in this kind of way leads to criticism of you and of the party. Just this morning in Le Devoir, in the Journal de Montréal, you can read commentators saying that you're catering to the English-speaking community, you're bending over backward. I mean, people use it as a cudgel to beat you. And I guess that leads me to the question of, what do you think you can do and the Liberal Party can do to overcome that sense that the English-speaking community is just a problem, just a threat, something that somehow is not an integral part of Quebec society?
The very first job I had as an engineer, I was 4 times a minority. I was a young, female, Black, French speaker in Ontario. And I remember telling myself, how do I connect with all the people that are in front of me? And this experience really helped me understand how you build bridges with, understand that people are criticizing us, and it is also François Legault's doing of saying, you know, it's French versus English. I'm not going to participate in an English debate. I won't participate in this interview. This is creating that sense of division that is not needed. But at the end of the day, when I talk to people, people see that this is going too far. People feel that when François Legault is talking about an anecdote, when somebody speaks a different language at home and is not, you know, that this is not something that is typical in Quebec. When he says these things, when he talks about Louisiana, Quebec becoming a Louisiana, people realize that this is going way too far. So we have to stand up for what's right. We have to be this party where everybody feels welcome, whether it is our English-speaking community, whether it is a French, the Francophones in Quebec, and realize that we all building in Quebec together. I want, it's not because you have articles saying, you know, this is what you're doing, etc., that this should orient what you're going to be talking about. We're going to go through an election right now. We're going to be talking about the future of Quebec. We're going to be talking about the type of Quebec we want to see, and the Liberal Party is going to stand for the true values of the Liberal Party.
Ms. Anglade, it's been great of you to spend this time with us. I want to give you just a couple or 3 minutes to sort of wrap things up here. Some last thoughts for the people listening.
I heard the Premier say many times that he wants to represent the people that voted for him. I was elected in 2015 as a MNA for Saint-Henri Sainte-Anne, and you get elected by a number of people. But at the end of the day, once you are elected as an MNA, the first thing you learn is that you are representing every single person, whether the person voted for you or not. As a Premier of Quebec, I don't want to be the representative of the people that voted for me. I want to represent every single Quebecer. And our future lies in our ability to get together, to work together, to talk to each other and find solutions. I'm an engineer by training. I like to find, like when I see issues, I like to find real solutions. But this is what it's all about. And this election is not only about the economy. It's about the economy. It's about the future of Quebec. It's about the vision, the common vision that we share. And I'd say it's about being progressive. And that's what the Liberal Party is all about, being progressive. So I really encourage people to read the platforms, to reach out to us, because at the end of the day, on October 3rd, we want to vote for real. And that's why we encourage everybody to vote for the Liberal Party.
Ms. Anglade, thank you again. Great to have you with us. Dominic Anglade is the leader of the Quebec Liberal Party. We're going to be continuing with this series of town halls with leaders of various parties coming up to the election. The next person we'll be welcoming is Colin Standish, leader of the Canadian Party of Quebec. He'll be with us next Wednesday. Thank you all very much for joining us. Thanks to the team at QCGN, especially the technical folks who made sure that this all flowed as it was supposed to do. We'll look forward to seeing you in a week's time, a little more than a week's time, for our next session coming up next Wednesday evening, same time, same kind of approach and same kind of systems and structures that we'll be using. Once again, thanks very much. On behalf of QCGN, I'm Royal Orr.
Thank you to everybody.
Thank you.